They were making 6 figures a month, and now it's gone.
This might sound counterintuitive, but every once in a while, I kind of hope that there's a little bit of friction, a little something, because it gives me the opportunity to prove how much I care.
I picked WordPress because I fell in love with it.
One of the things that a hosting company needs to be better at in general is the fact that these other choices out there are not selling hosting.
Welcome to Impressive Hosting, a podcast about the role hosting plays in shaping the open web. I'm your host, Jesse Friedman. On this show, we go deeper than uptime and dashboards. We talk about hosting as infrastructure, about ownership, independence, and what it takes to build ethical, high-end WordPress hosting that actually serves creators, businesses, and the internet itself. Before we dive in, head to impressive.host. That's where you can comment on episodes, ask follow-up questions, and help shape future conversations. You'll also find links to follow, like, and subscribe wherever you listen. This is part 2 of a talk back in Mumbai at WordCamp Asia with Stacey L. Alston, Director of Affiliate and Influencer Marketing at Automattic. We covered why every creator should own a website and the real risk of building a business on top of someone else's platform. In this episode, we get into the operational side. Stacey tells the story of an influencer who tested Automattic's support incognito, found a real gap in our AI chatbot, and called it out. Short version, the head of customer support at Automattic fixed the issue, and we went public with the update. We also got into Automattic's 2026 push to reach beyond tech influencers into florists, tattoo artists, and the small business owners who actually make up the bulk of WordPress users. Stacey's pitch for hosting companies here is pretty direct. Package up recipe sites, link in bio pages, and niche WordPress solutions that influencers can actually put their name on and sell. And yes, we end up on AI, of course. Stacey has a line I've been thinking about since we talked. AI is your first draft, never your last draft. I love that. We get into the attribution problem for influencers whose content gets read and summarized by AI, the 98% drop in organic traffic that tutorial sites are seeing, and whether there's actually hope on the other side of this. Here's part 2.
Well, we're back in India at
Yeah.
WordCamp Asia for part 2 of our conversation. Stacey and I have been having a great conversation about influencer marketing and building a network and the power that it has to protect your own influence that you have there. If you haven't watched the first part of this interview, I would definitely suggest going back and watching that. So, we were talking about the way in which you attract influencers. And so I'm curious, are you thinking about this from the perspective of people who are already talking about websites as a whole, or are you kind of branching out beyond that and thinking about people who are selling makeup or, whatever?
Yeah, one of our big initiatives for 2026 is going outside of the tech aspect. It's talking to the people who have built a business on a website, but are also, they're florists, they're tattoo artists, they're not technical people, but they have figured out how important a website is.
Right.
And so having them tell that story is incredibly impactful because it's an aspect of like, hey, I'm not a tech person.
Yeah.
I'm not using those big words that I don't even know half of what they mean. But, for a developer, they understand all of that. But
Sure.
we need people to talk to the mom and pops, the self-employed, those type of people.
Right.
And so having them tell the story is incredibly important because, we go through life and we're like, we keep looking for people who look like us.
Mm-hmm.
So the small business owner, and they want to know that there's other people out there who've created a business, who's created a website. Like, oh, I totally see myself in that person. They were just like me, and look at where they're at now. So
Yeah.
having them tell the story is as important as having a tech person who's always talking about WordPress talk about it as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think that's actually really poignant because you're looking at it from the lens of like the larger WordPress community.
Mm-hmm.
I think at a WordCamp like this, we tend to have this mentality that everyone is super invested in WordPress and that they love WordPress, they love the community, they want to give back. But the vast majority of WordPress users are actually those mom and pops,
Yeah,
or the people who are
absolutely.
running a business, trying to get things going. and they have 100 focuses, and being a web designer is not
Right.
necessarily one of them.
Nope.
So you're tapping into an audience that can speak their language
Exactly.
essentially
Yep.
and have done it
Yep.
themselves,
Yeah.
proven that it can work,
Mhm.
and they're taking these advantages, and
Yeah.
that's amazing. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
great.
I've been using WordPress since 2008, and I honestly can say that it was probably 10, 15 years before I actually understood what open source was.
Right.
I mean, because that's not why I picked WordPress.
Yeah.
I picked WordPress because I fell in love with it. Like, I tested out all the
Someone probably
CMSs.
recommended it to you or
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that. Or as you were testing them around.
yeah. I tried out a whole bunch of them, and I landed on WordPress because, I got in there, I understood it, but I didn't know what open source
Right.
was. It wasn't important to me. What was
Yeah.
important to me was automating something that I was doing manually.
Yeah.
And so it did the job. It did it really, really well.
Right.
It wasn't much later until I actually understood what open source was. And so, when we're talking here at WordCamp, everybody understands what open source is. But if
Right.
I go talk to my friend Jill, she doesn't know what open source is, nor does she want to know what open source is. She has more important things like feeding her family and
Yeah.
making money and building her business.
Right.
Those are the things she's concerned about.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really interesting aspect because we care about open source
Yeah.
so much. And part of this podcast is so heavily focused on protecting the open
Yeah.
web and making sure that we all have a voice and all that stuff. And it's okay, I think, for folks at home who are like just trying to build a website and get moving to not necessarily have that front of mind, because our job is to protect the open
Yeah,
web. And our job is to provide a great experience on top of
Yep.
WordPress
exactly.
that everyone can use, and in effect that empowers them or it drafts them into our open web army in a sense, right?
Yeah.
To continue to protect and strengthen that. And I think, we were talking about social media, but I think the same issue runs deep with closed platforms.
Yes.
You look at Squarespace or Shopify, things like that. The fact that Matt is pushing so heavily on data liberation and this idea that you can own your content and take it wherever you want to go. So if your
It's
hosting
huge.
company is not something you agree with, or they're shutting down or whatever, you can be portable with
Yes.
WordPress. You can move. And a lot of the time, other hosting companies provide migration tools and services and just make it so seamless for you. But one of the things that comes up at these WordCamps all the time is like these companies build on Shopify,
Mhm.
and it tends to be, the user experience maybe is a little bit more in alignment with what they're hoping for or whatever. And then they grow and they start doing better. But the thing about Shopify is that the better you're doing on Shopify, the
The more it
more,
costs.
the higher your costs are.
Absolutely.
And the funny thing is that you get to a place where it's like, you can very easily, as a WordPress agency, say to someone, hey, the cost involved in migrating your site from Shopify to WordPress, you'll make that back 10 times because of the
absolutely.
fees that you're no
Yep.
longer paying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's funny is I was a COO of an e-commerce company, and it was on Shopify. And I remember every single month I would sit down and look like, oh, we got successful. Oh, look, we now have to pay more because
Right.
we have more users.
Yeah.
And we would actually sit there and try to figure out like, okay, can we prune our lists
Yeah.
for this plugin? Because the more people we have, the more they charge us.
Yeah.
And it's that whole aspect. And what's even funnier is that we didn't use Shopify for our blog. We
Yeah.
used WordPress
Right.
because it was far more superior.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so we created a subdomain specifically for our blog, and that's where we put all of our articles.
Right.
And so it's an aspect of, even then, we had outgrown it just in regards to needing the SEO aspect.
Yeah.
And so, but yeah, it's the more successful you get, the more expensive it becomes.
Yeah. And one of the things that we talk about around the core tenets of great managed WordPress hosting is this idea of aligning your host's business with the success of your customers. And some people might argue that that's what Shopify is doing because they're not charging you early on very much. But in fact, what they're actually doing is taxing your success.
Yeah.
Whereas with what we hope for good hosting companies, is that they're actually promoting the growth of their customers.
Yep.
And the thing is, I don't know a hosting company that's charging more as you get better. What they might be doing is, there's bandwidth costs and
Right,
other things that are
right.
associated. but they're usually grounded in something real,
Right.
and they're not just like, taxing you in a
Right.
sense.
Right.
Yeah. So, to double back on the influencer network, I'm curious, you're curating content in a sense for these influencers, helping them to understand
Yep.
the products that are being released by Automatic and all that. But what happens if someone tests a product and it's not perfect? We're a very open company.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that we're proud about is the fact that, we're open source based. We're very open about the way in which we develop and launch, but we're also pretty transparent about things that sometimes they don't work or,
Yeah.
we didn't nail it.
Yeah.
And so what does that mean when you're working with an influencer network? Are they, like, are you influencing them to promote something even if it's not a great experience?
Nope. Nope. And in fact, a perfect example of this is that right about the time of WordCamp US last year, we were working with an influencer and he was doing a blind. We did not know he was doing this. He was going around to each one of the hosting companies to see how their customer experience was. He
Yeah.
was doing it incognito, so we didn't know he was coming through the pipe flow
Mm-hmm.
because he wanted an honest opinion. And he happened to stumble into some rare AI issue with our chatbot,
Okay.
and he got 0 responses from us.
So this is a support chatbot.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So technically, what should have happened is that once he had a specific problem, it should have sent him and up, to the next tier of support. Like, and it didn't do that.
Okay.
And so he reached out, and he did this with multiple companies. He didn't just
Yeah,
look at
sure.
us, but he reached out afterwards, and he said, "Here's what I found."
Yep.
And then he sat and he said, "I just want to see what the response is."
Right.
And so he told us, we took accountability to the point where the head of customer support came in. She talked to him. They figured out what the problem was. They plugged the issue that was happening. And then he did an update like, hey, here's all the companies I reached out to, all the hosting companies. And this is what they did. And
Yeah.
that's the biggest aspect is um, every company has shortfalls.
Right. Sure. No one's perfect.
Nobody's perfect. It's the accountability aspect. When somebody comes to me and says, "Stacy, I don't like it when this happens," I'm going to be okay. How can we make sure that never happens again? And I'm so sorry it did happen.
Sure. Yeah.
But the thing is that some of the companies he reached out to who he had a bad experience didn't reply back to him.
Right.
And that speaks volumes to me
Yeah.
as a
Right.
customer, because if they can't even come back and say, "Oh my gosh, I am so sorry
Yeah.
that this happened. Let's make this better for the future."
Right.
They're doing this to everybody. They're doing
Yeah.
it to all their customers,
What's funny is that I work in partnerships, and this might sound counterintuitive, but every once in a while, I kind of hope that there's a little bit of friction, a little something, because it gives me the opportunity to prove how much I care.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's not about the fact, being perfect actually kind of makes you a little invisible,
Yep.
right? Because
Going back to I want people to forget who their hosting company is.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Like, and what that means is that things aren't going haywire, things
Right.
aren't going wrong.
Yep.
But the reality situation is, as much as you hope for that, it's probably never going to be
Yeah.
exactly
Yeah.
perfect, right? But if there is that little bit of friction, you can jump in and you can make the situation 10 times better than it was. And being vulnerable and transparent about your shortcomings gives
Yeah.
you the opportunity to build trust and
Absolutely.
build a better relationship.
Yeah, and it's this. We're a business, yes, but we're humans first,
Right.
and and that's how I personally lead my team and my the affiliate and influencer program. Like, we're humans.
Yeah, sure.
It happens, and life happens. And if an influencer comes to me and says, "Stacy, I'm sorry, I fucked up, and I did not meet the deadline. I'm gonna be," and they say, "This is the reason why, and here's how I'm gonna fix it." I'm not gonna look at them and say, "I'm sorry, the contract's over. Like, you didn't
Right.
meet your deadline."
Yeah.
Because again, life happens.
Yeah.
And so, it's when you lead with human, if you lead with
Right.
empathy and you lead with understanding and that you are fallible,
Yep.
that goes a really long ways with a customer,
Right.
because then if you're being honest and transparent versus, oh, that never happened,
Yeah.
gaslighting people,
Right.
no,
Right.
like you just don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's interesting because a lot of the time people don't know this about WP Cloud, but one of the things that we do is it's not just about offering a platform that they can sell and feel very safe about. It's not just about offering a platform that, our partners are offering 100% uptime. They're not even having arguments about 4 nines or 5 nines. They're just offering 100% uptime.
right.
But the other part of it is that myself, my team included, we have been working on helping hosting companies be successful
Yeah.
for over a decade. And so we are able to help them go to market. And
Yeah.
we're actually able to help them do better and sell better. Part of the reason for this podcast exists is to help inform hosting companies on ways in which they can protect the open web and do
Yes.
more and make more money
Yeah.
doing it. And so, it's a great opportunity for us to be able to build those relationships and to, influence
Yeah.
the way in which, great managed hosting is being sold. And I think that's amazing that you have the ability and, basically the leadership, the knowledge to do it in that way and to solve those problems in that way. But you know what I think else is really great about that? It's like coming to light for me is that, Automatic, we have this annual support rotation.
Yep.
Matt talks very heavily about how we should be very customer focused. We should be talking to customers, reaching out to them all
Yeah.
the time. But an influencer is actually a little bit different because if you're talking to a customer and they're trying to accomplish a goal and they can't get that done, they may just walk away and it's hard to communicate with them.
Right. Yeah.
But when you're asking an influencer to promote a product, it's not just about them using the product behind the scenes. And if it doesn't go right, then they might have a terrible experience, but it doesn't really cost them anything
Right.
other than
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But when they have to put their name and their brand and
Yep.
their livelihood behind a product, and if people don't trust them anymore and they break
Right.
that trust,
Right.
that's a big problem. So I would imagine you're probably getting some pretty great feedback from your influencers
Yeah.
on the actual products themselves
Yes.
as well.
Yeah.
So if we're thinking about this from the perspective of how hosting companies out there can benefit from an influencer network, it's not just the fact that they're going to help you sell, but it can also be a channel to improve your product.
Yep. Absolutely. This year we're launching an influencer ambassador team and an affiliate ambassador team. And these are people specifically in our program who give us that feedback.
Yeah.
And sometimes you have to be okay with getting really, really bad feedback. But that's important.
Not bad feedback in the sense that it's low quality feedback. Critically bad
Yes,
feedback.
yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because and it's so incredibly important. In fact, I was talking to somebody earlier this morning. They're like, how do I give feedback to my engineering team?
Right.
And I said, well, you start doing customer interviews.
Yep.
And then you start looking for the trends and patterns,
Mhm.
and you start documenting those.
Yeah.
Out of 100 phone calls, 87 of those said this specific problem is their biggest aspect.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you go to engineering and you show them the numbers.
Right.
They can't fight against the numbers.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to them and saying, okay, here's the numbers, we need to fix this product. But we can't get that data unless we talk to our customers. And in this case, for me, it's the influencers.
Yeah.
They're hearing from their viewers on a regular basis. Like, oh, yeah, I love them, but
Right.
and I want to know that. I want to know how many times that comes up in a conversation, because again, that's a trend and pattern for me to go to engineering and say,
Yeah.
listen, this is a big problem. Let's
Right.
solve it.
Right. And if you think about it, the way in which these influencers are making money is that they're investing their time in writing or building or
Yep.
designing content that is going to promote your product.
hmm
And if your product doesn't follow through on the promises that they're making, then they're going to lose trust in
Yeah.
their customer.
Right.
And then their audience becomes less valuable. Then their influencer network, their
Yeah.
network becomes less. They get at risk of
Mhm.
being what's the word I'm looking for? Decentral, I don't know. But on social
Yes,
network,
yeah.
shadow banned or whatever
Yeah,
you want to
yeah.
call it, right? So they have a very tight alignment
Yep.
with our product. That's
Yeah.
actually really interesting and a really great way, I
Yeah.
think, to align the user experience with that influencer network. That's very cool.
There's influencers that we've reached out and they've said, no,
Right.
I'm not going to work with you until X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, awesome.
That's great.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So like I think some people might think of that like as very discouraging. But in fact,
No.
that's actually like
It's like,
you know exactly what to fix
yeah,
now.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so when
Right.
X, Y, and Z is fixed, they are the first person I'm going back and saying, hey, this is fixed.
Right.
And it was based off of the feedback you gave
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
and now can we work and it
Right.
9 times out of 10, it's like, yeah, let's work together.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because, I was thinking about this the other day, the fact that one of the things that I think are encroaching on the open web, we talked about social media, we talked
Yep.
about closed platforms, but I think a lot of times people don't necessarily recognize the fact that there are services now that are providing solutions for customers where otherwise they would have built a website. So a great example of this is like a link in bio,
Yep.
right? Like Linktree. These guys came out of nowhere and solved a very real problem.
Yeah.
And I think they, obviously they did a good job because
Yeah.
it's not just them. There's like 6 versions of this now and they all
Yep.
exist everywhere. And again, it goes back to that idea of, well, all you have to do is fill out a form. It's essentially a web form,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
pump in all your social media links and you click a few buttons to curate it, make it pretty or whatever. And then boom, you have a link tree and you drop that in your social media and
Yep.
it works.
Link in bio.
But the thing is, a decade ago, those people who wanted a quick way to link out to those things would have built a website.
Yeah, absolutely. A one-page website.
Right.
I had those.
And I think what happens is that ends up being a gateway into learning how to build more on your platform.
Yeah.
And then eventually maybe even sell things. And one of the things, like my daughter, I'm still, watching old episodes of Star Trek and we joked around about watching West Wing or whatever. My daughter lives in YouTube, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so for her, the thing is, it's not it gets a little meta because she and I will sit down and we'll actually watch videos together. And she brings up these awesome documentaries and these video essays. And one of them was about someone who was, they do these video essays on history and they teach history from a different angle. Maybe it's something you wouldn't have seen necessarily in a history class. And they do it with stick figures or whatever. And it's charming and it's fun. And I guess he did a video on something that touched on like World War II and some of that stuff. And the algorithm just deemed it as hate, even though it was a factual history-based thing. And, so he ended up doing a follow-up video where he documented the amount of time and effort and work that he put into making this video, which is not something I necessarily think about, but there are hundreds of hours going into these things. And it's not a hobby for him.
Yeah.
It's his career.
Yeah.
And so when he gets devalued or I'm still trying to remember the name of the word there, but like he actually showed his YouTube income and he had expected to make X dollars from this video. And because it got pushed aside, we'll say, and they didn't give the ad revenue to it, it totally crushed his like quarterly goals, which is basically money in his pocket. Because these influencers don't necessarily have a team, but if they do, sometimes they do, then you're not paying their paychecks because of this whole algorithm thing. Anyways, which leads me to a question around AI.
AI.
Weird transition, but these people are making this content.
We can't have a conversation about
Right,
there's a
it
conversation about
has
AI.
it has to circle back to AI. And what's funny is I've noticed a pattern with this show is that I try to put it off. And then it always comes to last question on the second part of the episode. But they're spending all this time making this content.
Yeah.
And so I have a 2-part question around AI. One is that you're talking to influencers who are making content.
Yep.
So I'm curious from your perspective, do you have a bead on what they're thinking in terms of AI and the idea that they, maybe they can accelerate, maybe they can move faster, but maybe there's people coming out now and making their own content and moving faster and doing it all with AI. Do you feel like they care and put an emphasis on human-made content?
Yeah. This actually came up in at a influencer conference that I went to, and we talked about creating AI influencers.
Yeah,
And n- I think as much as people want that to happen, there's an ethical aspect of it.
sure.
And there is this need, this inherent human need to actually see humans.
Yeah,
And there's a little bit of a deception where when you look at what you think is a human and it's not.
right.
And so as
The
far as
uncanny
like
valley is now like,
right,
yeah,
yes. So in the influencer world, the vast majority of influencer managers are very much against it, just mainly because we do want the honest take of a human. Um, we want real expertise, not just what it has gained from the internet. So yeah, there is the human aspect of it. And as I told my 19-year-old son when he was in high school, AI is your first draft. It is never your last draft.
mm,
Um, because if it's your last draft, it is void of all of you.
yeah,
And, AI is a part of our lives now, and
yeah,
it's moving in such a way that is so fast. I have not seen any part of technology, and I haven't been around for a while. I was around during the dot-com bubble burst,
yeah,
but this is moving at such a speed that it just boggles my mind. And, it's an aspect of you have to integrate AI into your life. You have
yeah,
to. I integrate it on a daily basis.
right.
There's so many things that I send through, and I do it simply so I can spend more time with humans.
Yeah, I took a sabbatical last year and it was for 3 months I was off. It felt like 5 years in the
Yeah.
sense that when I came back, so much has changed
Oh,
and I was
absolutely.
completely disconnected from it all. And now AI is not necessarily an option
No,
anymore.
it's not.
And, we see all these things about people, losing their jobs and stuff. And I think there's maybe something to that. I'm not 100% sure, but I do believe that you can actually, if you stop fighting it and you're not the person selling carriages when the automobile is coming out, right? And you
Absolutely.
adapt,
Yeah.
that you can actually you can use it as an accelerant. And, I'm playing around with this idea in my head of, um, you think about composers for like a movie. You think about, um, the president of the United States, right? Like he has speechwriters.
Yeah.
These are people who are attributed to the creation of some content,
Yeah.
but in reality, they have a team that is behind them that is doing a lot of the work.
Yeah.
And so they maybe aren't necessarily writing every single word of that speech of the president, for
Yep.
example,
Yeah.
or like, I always go back to like the West Wing,
Yeah.
right? Or like, JFK's speech, right? Like, some of the most famous words ever said by a president was that maybe not actually written
Yeah.
by the
Yeah.
president himself. And so, you think about the way in which they orchestrate
Yep.
this stuff. They have a bunch of humans and they basically, their job is to redline,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
This is what I want. This is the ethos this is the philosophy I'm trying to get across. This is the story, the narrative. Go figure it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
And then they come back and then you either got it right or you didn't.
Right.
And I think we can't all afford a speechwriting team. We can't
No.
all afford a team of composers, but we can leverage AI to
Absolutely.
do that for us. And
Yeah.
so you can go to Claude and say, this is the plugin that I want written. This is the article I want written. This is the image I want designed, and then keep tweaking. And if you're putting real human effort into it
Yeah.
and you're signing your name to it,
Yep.
I think that's something very different than what I think people have in their mind, that like there's this imaginary world where you go to AI and you say, make me a 3-minute commercial. Here's one prompt
Yeah.
and it's done.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that people have that in their mind that like, that's just how AI,
Yeah.
and of course there are people who are putting out junk like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But I would not consider that like really creative work. That's not human work.
Yeah.
That's pure AI. That's kind of the crud, right? Let's put
Yep.
that aside. But I think you can use AI to empower you to kind of get your voice out there.
Yeah.
And I think you can double, triple, quadruple the amount of content that you're writing. And I think that's really powerful if we can figure out a way to feel comfortable with it.
Yeah.
But there's another aspect to AI when it comes to influencers, which is interesting to me because we were talking yesterday about this idea that they're writing this content, they're generating these articles, they're writing these videos, and the way in which they get paid, the way they get their return on their investment is a URL with a parameter on it that attributes them to the sale of a product. So what's happening with AI when they're going out and reading that article? So I'm on Claude and I'm like, I need a website. Who should I use? And Claude goes and reads your blog and you suggest WordPress.com. So then Claude suggests WordPress.com to me, but what happens? Like, if I decide to sign up at that moment, do you get the attribution?
Nope. No. And this is where we sit. AI is phenomenal. I'm not gonna, but there's gonna be a day of reckoning that's coming soon. Because what we are seeing is that the internet is being changed in a way that it's ending businesses. You know, all these businesses out there that have made a business of creating tutorials. They've seen a 98% decrease in organic traffic. And when you do this long enough and you make enough people mad, there's going to be this aspect of, we're not going to put up with this anymore. Your AI is over creating all the rules and we're just going to sit back and just let them do it. And so it kind of goes back to you either pivot or you die. And so it's an aspect of, what do we do as website owners and businesses and all of that? What do we do to make sure that we're protecting ourselves? And it goes back to, going back to the .com bubble. There's so much AI out there. It's inundating us, but there's going to be a point where we're just like, enough. We can't. We're enough. And everybody's predicting it. Everybody knows it's coming. And so we're super excited about AI right now, but there is going to come at that point where it's going to level out.
Right.
And I think a lot of the things that we have seen in regards to people being okay with AI, people are going to push back. Like, the CEO of one of the biggest hospitals in the state of New York just came back and said, we're going to fire all of our radiologists and we're going to have AI read all the scans. As a human, I'm not letting AI read my scan to let me know whether or not I have cancer. Been there, done that, not going to allow that to happen. So, so it's an aspect of, we as humans want humans, and we're going to eventually move back to the human aspect of it.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because even when AI is able to, like, if we can use data, we talked about data in the last episode, how important data is. If we can use data to prove that AI can actually read these x-rays or whatever better.
Absolutely.
But it's the responsibility of the people making the decisions around that AI to prove and to gain and build the confidence that humans need to feel comfortable with that. And I think that you're right that, maybe it's kind of scary to think about this idea that maybe we'll put AI into robots and then robots can actually handle, and then, it's a little sci-fi. But, I think as long as there's a human element to it, and what it does is it ends up, if we think about it from a perspective of empowering a single person to do more, you look at every single hospital in the country, in the United States anyways, they're overrun, there's too much going on, you have to wait for appointments, things like that. So AI can actually help support and grow
and
help more customers. But the idea that, like, we're just going to set it up and let it run on its own is kind of ridiculous.
But and this is where I see a lot of companies right now is I look at the general aspect of the tech community right now, and there is this expectation that AI is just going to replace it all. I'm not for sure which. It's one of the big server companies. They let AI go through and it overwrote some code and it shut down websites for hundreds of other companies. And now they're stepping back and saying, oh, maybe this isn't a good idea. Because you still have to have that senior developer looking at the code, making sure that it's taken care of. But then there's also the aspect of, if you're not coding, you lose the muscle memory. And then you can't maintain the code that AI created.
Right.
And so you're now in this situation of like, oh, well, now what do I do? You
Right.
know? And
Yeah.
so I think we're at this excitement. We're like grabbing the AI and
Yeah. Yeah.
incorporating it. But I think what eventually is going to happen is that we're going to be in a space where we're going to say, this is how it helps me do more for humans.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Instead of creating this report that takes me 2 weeks to do, I'm actually going to have AI create it for me.
Yeah.
I'm going to go through and make sure everything's correct, which takes me a day.
Right.
And then I put it out.
Yeah.
And now I have a week minus 1 day
Yeah.
that I can actually set up appointments with affiliates and influencers and
Right.
talk to the human aspect of it.
Yeah. We're at time, but I'm going to tell my producer, John, that he's going to have to deal with it because it's such a good conversation. I want to go on for a few more minutes because
Okay.
I have a couple things in my head here that I want to explore super fast. So real quick, we were talking about influencers and the fact that their content may be consumed by AI and shared, but
Yep.
then they won't get that attribution. But to counter and play devil's advocate, isn't that kind of like what happened with Google when they started showing the results to answers that you were
Yep.
asking in the SERPs,
Yep.
search engine result pages, but not actually diving you into the pages, right?
Right.
And I
Yep.
think people were losing their minds over that. But, I think influencers are still around. People are still making a
Yep.
ton of money. So, are we inflating the problem, or is it something that maybe we can rectify and solve for? Is it something that maybe because AI is moving so fast, it's kind of like highlighting this problem,
Yeah.
and then otherwise, like with Google and search engines, maybe this is something we would have seen kind of gradually happen over a period of years, but
Yeah.
because AI is moving so fast,
Yeah.
it's like a tip of the spear problem where it's happening right now and it's acute.
Yeah.
But maybe there's a little bit more hope at the end of that rainbow.
I have the hope that the people who are creating AI understand that if they put all the businesses that are writing content, who
Yeah.
are doing videos, if they put them all out of business,
Yeah.
where are they going to get their AI content from?
Right.
And if they put all of these people out of business and all they have is information that was created last year,
It's suddenly stale.
it's stale,
And
it's
we know that
outdated.
that can't happen on the
Right.
internet. Right.
So my hope is that the companies that are doing the AI, the Google AI suggestion, that
Yeah.
they are thinking about the fact that, again,
Content
they have to have content.
Content is royalty, not king. Royal.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Right.
Because they cannot continue to exist
Yeah.
without all of these content creators,
Right.
plain and simple.
Yeah. Yeah.
So where are they going to get their content if they
Yeah.
put everybody out of business?
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that's it. So, maybe the pivot or the way in which they address this is, it'll reach an inflection point
Mhm.
and they'll be incentivized to solve it. And,
Yeah.
that's the hope, right?
Yeah, that's the hope.
And so even if, anytime there's a transition in these areas, I think that we run into a situation where people tend to, there's a little bit of panic, there's
Yeah.
a little bit of adjustments and everything like
Absolutely.
that.
And in this case, there's the right for panic.
Yeah.
Just mainly, when I start looking again, I go back to some of my biggest affiliates. They were making 6 figures a month,
Hmm.
and now it's gone. It's
Right.
just gone. And
Yeah.
and so there is a right for panic. And we have to keep figuring out how to help those companies. Again, it's a pivot or go out of business. So
Right.
how do you figure out how you become relevant again? And
Yeah.
a big part of my job is when I start seeing that one of my affiliates' numbers are going down because Google did this or this happened or AI took this.
Yeah.
It's me trying to figure out how do we get their numbers back up.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And, one of the things I'm thinking about actually, because it kind of ties everything back full circle, is this idea that, AI is eventually going to be selling things, right?
Yeah.
There's the opportunity for like your WooCommerce products to be featured inside of
Yeah.
AI and things like that. But all of this is coming from websites.
Yeah.
How much of AI's information, the things that they're promoting, are actually coming from these closed platforms that are maybe not less, accessible to, is that another reason to actually be owning a domain and having a
Ab-
website on the
Absolutely.
open
Yeah.
web?
Yeah. Because again, you need to diversify.
Right.
The word of the day is diversify.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because again, you cannot depend on any other business to keep you in business.
Yeah.
And so, you have to, and that's the thing about, WordPress, your hosting company for some reason goes out of business. They'll most likely tell you ahead of time, and you
Yeah.
can move to a different hosting company.
Right.
What happens if Wix goes out of business tomorrow?
Yeah.
Where are you going to move you're going to go out and hire a developer to move your website
Yeah.
to WordPress.
Right.
That's what you're going to do.
And it's going to cost a lot
And it's going to cost a lot of money
because
to move
there
it
isn't
over.
a way to just,
Right. And,
yeah.
going back to the full circle aspect of the open source, it's, you're not stuck in one place.
Right.
And you can move your followers from WordPress to WordPress, and they won't even know you moved. That's the cool thing.
Right.
With social media, it's like, oh, we're no longer on TikTok. Go follow me on Instagram.
Yeah.
You have to make a big production about it.
Well, yeah, because
Yeah.
you don't have the ability to kind of reach out
Yeah.
and
There's
talk.
there's
So
no,
you got to convince
yeah,
them, and then it's also a pain for customers. Like
absolutely. It's a huge friction point.
and if you're platform dependent, if you're
Yeah.
an Instagram fan and you're not a TikTok fan, or vice versa, you're probably losing a lot of those.
Yeah.
Those I'm saying customers, but
Yep. But
visitors.
with a
Yeah.
website, I can switch hosting and my customer will never know because
Right.
it's all done in the background.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the last thing I want to talk about with AI is that we talked about link in bio, we talked about Linktree, and how like these people were building websites, and then like it could grow, and then maybe they could sell, right?
Mhm.
And I think it's really interesting when you think about it from the perspective of influencers, because it's so common, I think, at least in my daughter's generation's world, that you see these creators out there and they're creating this content. And then, there's so much demand for a little mascot or a t-shirt
Yeah.
or a book or something, like, and so then they need to create merch and they need
Yep.
to create. And so that might be solvable with a social media platform, but then you're just increasing your risk, right?
Right.
Because now you're not only building your creator platform
Yeah.
on that, but now you're actually creating, your merchant
Yeah.
work and your actual direct revenue from sales on top of a platform
Yep.
that can decide to de-emphasize you
Oh, absolutely.
instantaneously. So I'm curious, like from the perspective of, AI, have your influencers been using AI site builders at all? And are they having much success with that? Because I'm thinking that they could, continue to focus on the content, the
Yeah.
things that they do really well.
Yep.
And leverage AI to help them kind of expand into selling and print on demand and doing all these things
Yeah.
that maybe is not their core, you know.
Yeah. And we have some who do, we have some who don't. But it's again, it's when you're always talking about designing a website for yourself, that is one core demographic.
Yeah.
But when they start talking about a web builder,
Yeah.
well, now they're bringing in an entirely new audience.
Right.
And, they got really good at talking to the developer.
Yeah.
And now they got to get really good to talking to the person who just wants to make, a 2-page website.
Right. Right.
And that's so important is, because you have to continue to build your audience. Eventually you're going to run out of experts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do you bring in new customers if you're only always talking to experts? So yeah.
Talking to the hosting companies at home, and I think this can kind of help us wrap things up
Yeah.
today, but I think what would be really interesting is that if you're a hosting company and you're talking to influencers and you're, taking that feedback that we talked about earlier, and it's super valuable. As a hosting company, one of the things that you could actually do to improve the opportunity for them to sell, to be successful, all these things, is to maybe curate, right, and build something that the influencer can sell that's directed
Oh.
at their target market.
Absolutely.
And so the influencer is not necessarily going to be the one to say, like, I'm going to configure WordPress in this way and I'm going to add these plugins.
Nope.
But if the hosting company says, all right, listen, we're going to go after, makeup artist influencers.
Yep.
And so what they need is these 3 plugins, and they need to be able to sell a few products.
Yeah.
And we can go and not only build that as a marketable
Yep.
marketable product, but we can actually give it to the influencers to then distribute.
Yeah.
And so, I circle back to WP Cloud all the time because one of the things that we have is golden images, this idea that you can craft the perfect pre-configured, curated website. You can include the plugins you want. You can configure them the way you want. You can use like WooCommerce and already have WooPayments as the default. Do all these things to benefit yourself as a hosting company, put it in a nice little package, put a bow on it, give it to your influencer and let them distribute it for you.
And because I mean, and we're finding this right now, and just even with like the algorithms, when you focus on a niche, it's actually more beneficial for you.
Right.
And so if you are so broad, like, okay, we're just going to do developers, but talking about people who create recipe websites.
Right. Good example.
They have their own needs. They need the little plugin that has jump to the recipe because nobody wants to read through all that SEO content.
They need ads on the site.
They need ads.
Social media, SEO.
Share with my, they have a set thing that they need. So let's give it to them. Let's just here you go.
And these are templatable patterns that you can replicate over and over again. And I think you're absolutely right that a hosting company should really be looking at solving for these niche solutions.
Yep.
We talked about link in bio. WordPress.com has a link in bio solution.
Absolutely.
We also have Gravatar, which allows for you to do that. But, any hosting company can go out and build restaurant websites, recipe websites, influence, they can make these things and then sell them.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that a hosting company needs to be better at in general is the fact that these other choices out there are not selling hosting. Shopify is not selling hosting.
No.
Right? You don't go to the website and compare CPUs to uptime and things like that.
No.
Like they're selling a platform that provides a service that happens to have a website that's hosted somewhere.
Exactly.
And so if hosting companies can get better at describing their products, less about hosting, but more about an end solution that they can market, then they can leverage their influencer market as well to sell into those areas. And then the influencers are probably going to make even more money because the products are more likely to convert. They're more likely to see success. Everyone's happy.
Yes. And, I think we get stuck on the hosting aspect, that word, hosting. I never called it hosting.
Yeah.
I just want to build a website.
Right.
I would say that the mass majority of people who want a website have absolutely no understanding what bandwidth is, what my SQL, what a database. They don't understand, nor will they ever want to understand.
Right.
And so when we start throwing big words at them and things that they don't even care about, we're losing them.
Yeah.
But if we can go in and basically say, here is a recipe website, everything's installed. You put in your name, we'll create a logo for you. Done.
And then the only thing that person has to do is focus on making the recipes.
And they can focus on what matters to them.
Right.
Their website doesn't matter. It just needs to do a job.
Yeah.
So let's help them do its job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a great place to end it.
Awesome.
Stacey, it was such a great conversation.
Yeah.
Can I have you back on soon?
Yeah, of course.
Awesome.
Always.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Impressive Hosting, where we uncover the core tenets of great WordPress hosting. Do you have a follow-up question for today's guest, thought or comment on anything we talked about, a future guest suggestion, a hosting horror story? What do you think makes great WordPress hosting? All your comments shape the show. Drop them on impressive.host. We also appreciate you following us on social media and subscribing to the podcast on your favorite platform. Finally, do check out our list of open source projects that need support at impressive.host. Whether it's code, community, or cache, you can make a difference. See you next time.
All right, that's it. Wow, we went way over time on that.
Sorry.
Huh? No, it was good.